Good afternoon and good evening. My name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real People, Real Health. I have a guest with me today, and I'm just trying to see if we're even live right now. Just give me a moment here. Yes, we are live. Welcome to the studio. I have a guest. Skye Williams has joined me in live from down under in the country of Australia. Welcome to the studio, Skye.
Thank you. Thanks, Jay. Thanks for having me.
So if you're joining us from the United States, it's actually 8:30 on the East Coast. It's 10:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. I believe you're coming in from Queensland area. Is that right?
That's right, in Brisbane, in Queensland.
You actually, I believe, may be my second or third guest coming in from the area. I don't know. Have you met Kate, by the way?
No, I haven't met her, no.
Just through Facebook, yeah. But I know she's not too far from there. And actually, she's in Mexico right now at Hope for Cancer, doing another treatment and all. But for those of you that are joining us live or coming in on replay, if you hear something that you like or love with love, press your like or love button on your device and feel free to ask any questions or share comments. This is a dialogue, not a monologue, and I'm excited to have Skye in with me today so that we can talk about a topic that we don't hear a whole lot about. We sometimes read about it in a women's health magazine, or if a movie star or someone in the music industry comes forward, a female in particular, and shares that they have suffered after giving birth to a child with postnatal or postpartum depression or anxiety. That's about the only time we hear about it, unless we actually have experienced it as a male with our partner who may be going through it. And so welcome to the studio, Skye. I would like to say that at any time, if I should ask you a question that you are not comfortable with, you can, with love, set a loving boundary, and I will absolutely respect you and respect the boundary, and we'll move on.
Thank you.
You and I met a number of months ago. I don't recall exactly how we met through the Facebook community. Do you recall?
Yeah, so I sent you a friend request because I saw some of the dialogue that you had on Kate's page. And I saw your, something that you said in that resonated with me. So then I sent you a friend request because I was looking at some of the work that you do, and I'm passionate about the same kinds of things with health and well-being. So I sent you the friend request, and that's how we connected.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. So what I'd like to do, Skye, is invite you to maybe settle into your chair a little bit. Hopefully you got some water there in case you should need it.
I do.
Beautiful. And why don't you begin to share your backstory, and we'll go from there.
So I'm a mom of two little boys, and I think back to when I was a young woman, and I always knew that I wanted to be a mum. But I also knew that I wanted to do it with the right person. So I had come from a family of, my parents broke up, and they had it was really challenging for us. I was, I think, 5 and my sister was 3. And I always remember my mum saying to me, make sure you make a good choice and make sure you're a bit older, and I was, I think 30 when I got married and 31 when I had my first child, on the premise that I, would be more sure about who I was before I entered into such a big decision. I always knew I wanted to be a mum. And, my mum and my sister both had depression and anxiety. And my mum talked about how bad it was when she became a mum herself, with postnatal depression. And I thought that because she, it was that she was so young and she wasn't really ready, that was really the cause, and that it wouldn't happen to me because I, really wanted to be a mom, and I'd made different choices leading up to it. So I thought that, I just didn't think that I would experience any level of postnatal depression or anxiety. But what happened for me was that, I went into super excited about becoming a mum. But I remember just about people had given me books and things about becoming a mum, and I hadn't read them. I'm not that kind. I think I thought I'm a natural and it's all going to be fine. The month before I was due, I started reading this book, and there was some things in there that I thought, wow, I'd never really considered this. So then it was when, like very close to the end of the pregnancy, the baby turned breech, and he just wasn't in a good position. And I did all these different, because I had this in my mind. I was very fixed on having a natural birth, and I'd done hypnobirthing, and it was, I didn't realize until I got to this stage how regimented and fixed I was in my thinking about things and my ideals about things. So then as we got closer to the birth, I had other issues from a previous illness. I'd had an autoimmune disease, aplastic anemia, where I had bone marrow failure. And it was only a few years later that I was pregnant. So at the end of my pregnancy, I had some issues with my blood, and my platelets were dropping, and they were concerned about the birth. And so we ended up deciding on having a cesarean. And then that's when the anxiety kicked in. And, I was aware that how I was feeling was affecting my baby, was going to affect my baby, but it overcame me. I was so terrified of having a cesarean. I was devastated and disappointed that it wasn't going the way I'd planned. And so then what happened was I went through that. And then when I went into the early stages of being a mum, I then blamed everything on, the birth and all of those sort of things. So then I was in a place of, a dark place from the very beginning.
Okay. So tell me more.
So then, and so at the time, the situation that I was in was, I went into motherhood thinking, well, as a woman, I'd kind of spent the years, working on being independent and being able to, do everything for myself. So I went into motherhood with the same kind of mindset, in that, I didn't have any kind of support system in place because I didn't really think I needed it. I was married, Peter and I are still married. We had a great communication with each other, and I felt supported by him, but I had no other support. So my sister was in a, domestically violent relationship and has her own mental health issues. So I had no support from her. My mum had a stem cell transplant. She was having treatment for cancer, and she had complications, so she wasn't available. My dad hadn't been talking to me for 5 years. And my mother-in-law, Peter's mum, wasn't talking to us because I wouldn't let them be there for the birth. Because I had made a choice that I wanted that sacred time for just our immediate family. So for whatever reason, somehow I'd either ostracized or I'd created this situation where I had no support. And then started motherhood with the lack of sleep and the rigid thinking that I had around how things should be. Excuse me. So
if I may interject in this moment,
yes.
What do you think was, knowing what you know today, what do you think was behind that for you? Why do you think you were so rigid in your thinking, in your belief system of sorts? What was behind that for you?
So now the understanding that I have around it is that I felt such a lack of control in my life that I had then I created, and I was very, very, I was very headstrong about lots of things. And when I went through the experience with aplastic anemia, so I was in my mid-20s, but just prior to that, I'd studied naturopathy. And, you know, I'd been introduced to alternative ways of doing things. So then, and I was so gung-ho about it. And what happened, I then faced this situation where I only had 7 days left of blood and in my body. And I was faced with a situation where in my mind, I didn't want to do the drugs and the treatment, but I had this issue of time. And so I feel like I created, in some way, I had this situation to really soften me, because that's what I had to do. I had to be more fluid and flexible about. So that was a health situation. So then as I went on into motherhood, I think there was still that residual kind of issue with control that I had personally. And I think that was the core of where the anxiety came from, because it was the loss of control, the loss of I went into motherhood. I had a great career and I had full control over my life. And then I had a very unsettled baby who just cried all the time. I had, he didn't really sleep much. I had no support. And so I had this perfect storm of a situation that really fed the anxiety because of the lack of control that I had.
So what happened then?
So then, that went on for months. I had the situation was that, he was my son was such an unsettled baby, probably because of me, probably because of me not being okay. But it was just that, is it the chicken or the egg that comes first? And, he hardly slept, and I had, I was putting all this, Peter was doing as much as he possibly could to support both of us. And it went on where I read something. I think I read something about how, I needed the things I needed to do to support myself through this experience. And one of them was connecting with other mums, was that the village was so important. But I had such bad anxiety and depression that I couldn't face going out. And that every time I put my baby in the car, he would scream this blood, like I couldn't drive. I was paralyzed by him screaming so much. And so I just was in this terrible, terrible dark place of not knowing how to get out of it. And then I remembered this one day as I'm sitting by myself in my apartment with this, and the only way he would stop crying is if I held him upright, so I'd just be sitting there. And then I just remembered the obstetrician's voice in my head, and he said, you shouldn't be crying every day. If that's the case, ring the office, and we'll offer you some help. So this day I rang and I spoke to the receptionist. Of course, I burst into tears as I started talking, and she said, yep, he'll give you a call when he has a break. And when he called me, he said, he showed empathy to me on the phone, and he said, you need to just get this referral. And he was referring me to a doctor, and he said psychiatrist, but I, in my mind, thought he meant psychologist, because I do understand the difference. So I wasn't really functioning properly because I was sleep deprived and I had such bad anxiety that I didn't really think through anything. So I went into the office and so this was about 5 or 6 months in. So that was a really long 5 or 6 months of being in such a bad place. And then I went and got the referral, and then made an appointment with this doctor. And so off I go it's a psychiatric hospital, and where the doctor's offices were. And I went in and took my baby in the capsule. He's screaming, as we're walking in, And then go in for my appointment. I sit down, and then he says to me, tell me, what's going on. I explain. And then he sat there, and he said, the problem is that it takes a village to raise a child. You don't have a village. So, you can take these medications. One was an anti-anxiety and one was an antidepressant. And
If
I
I
just
may,
looked at him.
if I may ask, Skye, what, do you remember what they were? Which ones in particular?
I don't know, but I could probably, I actually think I still, for prosperity, I think I kept the script because it was a big thing for me, because I decided that, that piece of paper was a lifeline, that they offered me, and that I decided not to take it, and I did it other ways. So no, I don't remember what they were.
It's okay. No worries.
Yeah.
Okay, so it gives you the prescription for an anti-anxiety, antidepressant, and says what as he hands it to you? This
and then
is going to help you. This is going to resolve your problem, or?
Well, no, he said this is going to make you feel better, so you can cope and just get through this horrible period of time. And I said to him, okay. And then he said, and that was it. And then he just sat there and looked at me, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is the end. So I think in my mind, I thought that I was going to go into an appointment and have a conversation of some kind. And in my mind, I thought it was some kind of counseling, which I later learned is what happens when you go to a psychologist. But that was it. And then he stood up, because that was the end of the appointment. And I held on to these two pieces of paper and looked down at them and just thought, oh my gosh. And so then what flashed before my eyes at that time was everything that I'd learned up until that point, and all of the experiences that I'd had since I was 14, that I'd had with naturopaths and chiropractors and all those people that had supported me up to that point. And then I looked at this script, and I just thought, and I just cried because I thought it was a hope. The hope that I went in there with was huge, because I thought it was going to help give me some kind of answer that I was looking for. And I was just crushed at that point. And so I walked out, and my husband was out there waiting for me. And then he said, and then I told him the story, and then he got really upset, because he said, because he knows how I feel and, about the whole thing. And we discussed it. And I said, if I take these, I know that it's just going to mute the feelings. Everything's still going to be there. It's not really a remedy to the core of the issue. So then it opened up a discussion between us of what we needed to do to get through this experience together. And we then had a discussion that went over a few days, and we brainstormed, and we just talked about how we could, the answers aren't with the doctors. They're not seeing things in a holistic way. And then I think for him, we were both in survival mode up to that point, that we kind of weren't seeing the forest for the trees. But it was really a wake up call for both of us, because when we got those scripts and we just realized that this isn't the answer, it then made us both go inward and really work out, the answers were all there. And we just went on this journey then from that point and the very first step for me was actually food, was actually changing how I ate. And then what I did was I sought out a practitioner, a holistic practitioner who could then support my nervous system. So then and then it was just step by step from
Okay.
there.
If I may step back,
Yes.
You knew when you walked out that you walked in with hope that you were going to hear something that he said in this session that was going to give you some, let's say, sense of a roadmap to navigate out of the space, this emotional space that you were in depression and significant anxiety. But you also walked out with clarity that what you went in there anticipating was going to happen didn't happen, but you came out with a whole new perspective than when you went in with. One of the questions I have for you is you mentioned you grew up in a home where your mom and your sister both were somewhat challenged to an extent with mental health disorders. I presume, perhaps not, that they utilized pharmaceuticals quite regularly if they were in a loop in the cycle of Western medicine to an extent, or medicine. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. So my sister, yes, but my mum, she decided no. So my mum was more a bit. We used to I likened her to an ostrich, bury her head in the sand. So she just didn't face it. So she wasn't medicated. She didn't get any treatment for her depression. And it wasn't until she got cancer for the first time, she was in her mid-40s. And then she went down the path and did the chemo and all of those things. And so then everything was blamed on that. There was no, so she was, my mum was unmedicated, but my sister, yes, is fully medicated and always has been.
At what point did you know that for you wanted to look at other alternatives than a traditional protocol? Like, had that been a journey that you were on prior to even being pregnant, or is this something that just came to you in a moment?
So I was reflecting on this the other day, and I thought, how did I arrive at this place where I've always sought a different perspective, and I think it's back to when, and funnily enough, it came from my mum. So when I was 13, I started getting migraines, but so bad that I would vomit and half my face would be numb, and there were severe migraines. And when we went to the doctor, they offered medication, and my mum said, I remember her words. She's like, that's not, she's 13, that's not going to solve the problem. That's just going to mask the pain. And so that was really the beginning of this different perspective for me. So then we started seeing a chiropractor and a naturopath, and I didn't really understand where it would lead me, but that was the seed. That was the very beginning, because I remember this chiropractor talking to me, and I remember looking up at him and him talking about the link between our emotions and our physiology. And I just remember looking at him thinking, he's just told me something. It just resonated so much and just opened my thinking. And so that was the beginning of it for me. So then, each thing that unfolded in my life, that seed just grew bigger and bigger. That, the plant grew from that. And because it just resonated with me, I just felt like that was what we needed to do to evolve into a happy, healthy person.
Beautiful. That's amazing. So your mom gave you one of the greatest gifts of your life, which is an alternative perspective and a different perspective, and an awareness that there are choices. Because so many people just don't know. I was one of those people. I had no idea that there were alternative choices to treating disease of any kind. It doesn't matter if it's mental health or if it's physical. As far as more of the typical type of diseases that are not related to mental health diseases, but ultimately, I had put all of my faith and trust in what a doctor or a few doctors said, because that was just the way I was raised. I wasn't raised in a home where there was any discussion or any insight that we should do our own research and we shouldn't put our lives into the hands of the medical community without doing our own research. And especially today, it's a little easier today than it was when I was a kid growing up because we didn't have the internet. We had very limited resources and it wasn't accessible within moments like it is today. And so there's just so much information out there that can help expand our knowledge and expand our awareness that there are choices to consider in every diagnosis that we are presented with. And so I just felt it was important to share that with you on. So I invite you to continue your story. So now you and Peter leave this doctor's office and you decide to explore some alternative ways to treat your anxiety and depression. You stepped into you found a holistic doctor of sorts, a holistic practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a naturopathic?
Yes.
Okay.
And so then I just spent, we both spent the time to just really research. And as you say, it's such a blessing that we have that it's we're in this time where information is so available. Because back when my mum was doing it, she either had to ask somebody or we would look through what we had, yellow pages, like a big directory to look through. And it was only businesses that had the money to advertise in places like that, that you could find. But so Peter and I spent time researching, and then I read books and I did lots of inner work to really look at, because my understanding is that when you become a mum, it really cracks you open, and you start to really reflect on how you were mothered, and I found lots of my stuff came up. So I found in the process of me looking at these things, I noticed that it impacted the way I felt, and it impacted the way I was managing this thing that was called anxiety and depression. So I decided to see the whole picture. I decided to acknowledge that I was a whole being that was experiencing this feeling of of no hope and of absolute loss of control. And I think the beginning of it was was having faith that I had all the answers within me, that I didn't have to find this thing outside myself, that it was kind of a coming back to myself, and that I could just listen to my inner voice, so that I could, because there's so much available. When you look, there's actually so much available. And it can be overwhelming. And so then, do I follow this diet, and do I take these herbs, and do I go to this practitioner, and do I go to counseling, or do I, have healing, or there's lots of different things. So I decided to really focus on, trusting myself, and then just put one foot in front of the other. And that's what I did. I just put one foot in front of the other and did each thing as it came up. And so it was changing the way I ate, and was seeing the holistic practitioner. And what she did was she also broke it down for me. So I find that sometimes, people tend to get overwhelmed, and it is much easier to just take one pill that's supposedly going to fix the big problem. Whereas when you choose to look at it from a holistic way, it's a holistic approach, and there's it takes commitment to and consistency. If you're going to take herbs and you're going to follow a different eating regime, you've got to do it consistently and day by day, so it becomes a lifestyle. And so it's about, for me, Peter and I made the commitment that we weren't going to take what we considered the easy road, which was the one pill, which wasn't really going to solve my problems. It was just going to really suppress them, and then I was going to have to deal with them at another time. So I decided I was going to, hit it face on, head on, and I was going to do it the holistic way, and I was going to step by step go through each thing, and that's literally what I did. And so when I started to make those changes and really support my body with the right nourishment, actually, I think that played probably the biggest role in the beginning, because the clouds started to lift and the anxiety started to be manageable. That
What do you think was, you said at the beginning, what do you think was the quick hit for you? What do you think you did initially that gave you the fast result, as opposed to popping that pill?
Yep. So the fast result, the two biggest things were no sugar and no alcohol. And so, and not that I drank a lot, but it was still, a few times a week, and that is enough to call, and still to this day, if I drink more than one drink, the next day I feel the difference in my body, and the anxiety is much less under control. So the biggest thing was, I actually bought a program, like a menu plan, this 8-week menu plan, on the suggestion. She explained, the naturopath that I was seeing explained about the role of sugar and alcohol in our hormonal balance and the way our body functions. So that was really the beginning. And when you start doing that, you realize how much you rely, particularly when you're anxious or depressed, if you're not dealing with your feelings, I can see how sugar can play a role in that, in filling that void. So that was the beginning for me, was the no sugar and the no alcohol. And then it was moving my body, doing exercise and raising my heart rate. And they seem so simple. And I know they seem so simple, but when you're depressed and anxious, you're kind of stuck. And yeah, and I just think I really wasn't doing that. And so then I started doing that and moving my body and things. And really the days seemed lighter, metaphorically, they seemed lighter. And then I had a more clear mind and the biggest thing that happened for me was the anxiety was so bad that I couldn't sleep. I'd never had insomnia in my life. I would go to bed early and I'd wake up and I'd be refreshed. The anxiety was so bad that when I'd get the baby to sleep, and then I would lay there for hours and I'd be like trying to do all these things to get myself to sleep, but it was that bad. The fear that I had of being woken again by the baby stopped me from being able to sleep. So I was not getting any blocks of sleep. And we all know how important sleep is for our, it's a basic function, a basic need of life. And, in order for us to reset. And so it was just this, it got worse and worse and worse, so then what happened was, as soon as I cut out the sugar and the alcohol, and then I started moving my body, and then I was able to get some rest. And then, there was more steps. I did meditation was then part of it. But if you had have told me on the first day to meditate, I physically couldn't do it. I could not do it because everything else was out and all jumbled. So it was this step-by-step process, and the start of it, because I honestly believe that what we put in our mouth affects us so greatly.
If I may ask, I could tell you when I was younger, I didn't drink a whole lot of water. I was definitely hooked on initially Coca-Cola product, and then I went to Diet Coke thinking that I was okay because I was having all the sugar that was in a regular Coke. But I didn't drink a whole lot of water, and I'm just curious, what role did water play in your healing process? How were you with water prior, and how did you up your water intake, or what was your experience with water?
And yes, so the practitioner said to me, just eat real food. So, if you look at the food and you can see what it is, then you can eat it. If it's mixed up into something else, don't eat it. Just make it really simple. And you must drink at least 3 liters of water a day. And obviously the preference was filtered water. So prior to that, because I studied naturopathy in my early 20s, I already had, I didn't drink soft drink, and I was very aware of, what I put into my body, but not to the degree as I was when I was trying to center myself from the anxiety and depression. But absolutely, I think water is just as important. And I think that I had an issue of dehydration because I was breastfeeding and because I had no appetite. And so, when I was in that period of deep depression and anxiety, I wasn't drinking water, and I wasn't looking after myself in any way, shape, or form. So I would say water played just as important role as the food I was choosing, because I then became conscious, and I started to do the things that were recommended, and 3 liters of water at least a day was one of them.
And if I may paraphrase you, your naturopathic doctor suggested that you avoid processed foods as much as possible. That's what I heard, meaning that if it comes in a box,
Or
don't buy it.
Yes.
Don't buy it. And also pay attention. You didn't say this, but non-GMOs, as it's referred to in the United States. I'm not sure if over in Australia, if they have that on labeling or not, if it's genetically modified. But yeah, so you started to pay more attention to not only less alcohol, less sugar, but also eating foods that came from nature, from the garden, more so, and less from the box on the supermarket shelf. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. And then what I went on to learn was, so that was the very beginning. But then what I went on to learn was the link between gut health and mental health. So I went on to learn about the gut biome and leaky gut and the role that played in mental health. And then I went on a journey of all of the health challenges I'd had to that point.
Prior.
Prior, all the health challenges that I'd had prior really all stem back to gut health. And it turns out that I'm gluten sensitive, and I had all these food intolerances that I knew that I didn't feel great, but I just didn't understand. I didn't feel great when I ate gluten, and I didn't feel great when I ate dairy. But you just carried on. And so it was then I went on and had testing and things. And then the next step then was really healing my body with food. So it was really only having, I don't know if you know that here a very popular lifestyle or way of eating is called paleo. So, with just, some animal protein, but no grains and, just vegetables and fruit and nuts and seeds. And so that's actually a way. And then, you're using collagen and gelatin and things from bone broths to really heal the lining of the gut. So that's what I ended up going on and doing. And I had great results with that in terms of my physical health and my mental health. So it was really focusing on just no packaged foods, absolutely no numbers, no preservatives and things, and if you avoid packaged foods, you avoid those numbers, but they put a real load on the liver and, the functioning of our body. So
Okay.
food is a huge part of it for me.
So what was some of the shifting from nutrition to other healthy lifestyle changes that you implemented and made after the birth of your first son? What were some of the other changes that you were willing to do to get well and stay well?
So the other major things were some breathing exercises. So, when you realize how shallowly we breathe, and then so I went to some breathing workshops and learned some tools that I could do at any time. And so it was breathing techniques that I learned and meditation. And so I think people have heard about how beneficial meditation can be, but we all have, and there's so many different types, and we all have, a different perspective on, what meditation is, and that. So what I found is that doing meditations for sometimes 5 or 10 minutes and having that as a regular part of my daily routine, really helped me stay centered. So I would say that the breathing and the meditation was a huge part, but also something that I think changed things greatly for me was gratitude. So at the time, when I was searching, I remember seeing a clip on Facebook, because I would endlessly scroll because I was being woken all the time by a baby to feed, that I saw Tony Robbins in an interview, and he was talking about gratitude, and I'd heard it before, but for some reason, the way that he talked about it really struck a chord. So then I started, because when I was in the dark days, I was only seeing the struggle, and I was only feeling the struggle, and I couldn't see a way out. And then as things started to shift, and I learned this practice of gratitude where I learned to see the silver lining of everything. And I knew that even when something was bad, like seemed bad at the time, that there is a silver lining to this. So it was a paradigm shift for me that started to change the way I saw things in general. And so then the tide started to shift.
Beautiful. Yeah. So you said you had been aware of gratitude and what that was about. You had an idea of it, but something resonated. For some reason, this time it was different when you heard something that Tony shared. And, there's something that they refer to as the teacher shows up when a student is ready.
Yeah.
You were desperate. You were open. You were in what I like to refer to as a surrender mode.
Yes.
And when I work with my clients in coaching sessions, one of the first things I say to them is it's only going to work if you want it more than I want it for you. I can't bring them I can't bring them to that moment where everything changes. I can guide them and I can inspire people, but they have to want it as desperately as you did, because everything was at stake at that point. Your life was, as you described it earlier on in the show, your life was out of control. And that for you was devastating, because how you got through your life to that point was creating a space and a life for you that had a lot of parameters, a lot of control parameters around it. That's how you felt safe, right? And for the first time, maybe in your life, Skye, your life was out of control. You had no more answers and you couldn't fix it. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. Yes.
Right. And, you know, I just want to say this. I am so grateful that you stepped in today to share your story of healing from severe anxiety and depression postpartum, because so many millions of women suffer with it, whether it be postpartum, postnatal, as you refer to it down in Australia, or not. Millions of men and women struggle with anxiety and depression, and they don't know how to get out of that rabbit hole. And once you're in it, it is a dark hole to escape from. And as far as so many people know, there's only one escape hatch, and that's to see a therapist and get the prescription. And your story you're sharing today is an alternative, and it's a beautiful alternative. And I just want to thank you for having the courage to step in today and share your story of your reality of how it was and what it took to escape that rabbit hole. Because I know this is that I'm hopeful that there's always one person that catches a show on live or on replay that hears something that they needed to hear, because perhaps you will be the Tony in their life today. You will be the person that has said something that they hear that is the beginning of their own awakening to healing from the pain of anxiety and depression. And so thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. We do have at least 10 minutes before we're up on the hour. With what time we do have left, I'd like to invite you to continue your story, and wherever you'd like to jump in at this point.
Yeah, so I think then, after that, you know, I started to embrace these tools, and things were really shifting, and I did have a more hopeful perspective on life. And then Peter and I remember vividly, we bought a house, our first house together. We moved in, we sat down on this patio outside. Excuse me. And then he said, he felt like, you know, the days were brighter and that we'd made it through. And then he said, how about we I know you wanted to have 2 children, but how about we just stop at 1? Our son was 12 months old. We'd moved into this house, and because for him, I can only imagine how it was for him going through that experience. And he didn't really, it really took a toll on him, but he didn't, you know, let me know that, because he was wanting to be there to support me. But he really was making it clear that he didn't want to go back there, because that was a really hard time. And then 4 weeks later, I was pregnant with my second son. And I remember his face, because he was like, oh my gosh. And me too. I really wasn't ready. for it, because I felt like I had just got myself back to a degree. So then I was going to go and tell my mum that I was pregnant again. And when I went to visit her, she then told me that she was terminally ill. So I didn't even get to tell her my news, and then she told me that. And then everything came flooding back for me. The loss of control and all of that. So then we navigated. She only lasted 4 months, and then she died. So I was 5 months pregnant at the time. And then I thought, this is it, Skye. You have been through this experience. You've got all the tools, and you have a choice at this point. Excuse me. You have a choice at this point, and I could curl up in a ball and go back into that place, because I could really sense it in my body and my mind. Or you can, because what had happened was, because I wasn't really, I didn't really feel ready to have another child. I was in this place of anxiety around wanting to be there for my mum and make the most of these last few months that we had together. But I was pregnant, and anyway, so then what happened was I decided to do everything that I'd learned, and I had created a beautiful village at the time after not having it the first time around. So I surrounded myself with like-minded people, and I, was really good with, I engaged help. I had a psychologist. So I did use, a psychologist, but I also had a spiritual counselor, and I just engaged and asked for all the help that I needed, which I had not done before. So I had wore it like a badge of honor that I was independent and I could do everything myself. And it was a completely different experience. And so then I went in and I said, I need as much as I can. I need all of this help. It makes me emotional thinking about it. And so I had a whole different experience the second time around. And, I got through it because, and that first experience prepared me for that, because, that was an extremely difficult time.
Hold on 1 second. If I may, I'm going to ask you to take a nice deep breath. Close your eyes, please, and take a nice deep breath and allow yourself to feel what you were just feeling and honor that. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. If I may ask, what's behind these emotions that just bubbled up for you right now?
Well, it's really gratitude for the support that I received at that time.
Okay. I think there's maybe something else that's coming to me in this moment. Well, I didn't ask you. Well, let me go, if I may. For me, what I really heard is that the first time around, you were still your old behaviors of feeling like if you didn't do it, you were out of control. You had a need to continue to show yourself that you can manage your life. But you learned the first time around that it really wasn't, by not asking for help was actually a sign of weakness, not a sign of strength. And the second time around, you had learned the lesson. You had some significant growth. And through that growth, you understood that to ask for help is actually vulnerable and shows strength. And perhaps behind that, gratitude is more of the fact that you are you're able to feel how much growth you actually experienced, and a lot of humility behind that, that thankfully you had the courage to raise your hand and say, Uncle, I need help. Can you help me? Especially because what you didn't really expand upon yet, at least, is that in your pregnancy, you first found out your mom was terminally ill, and then she passed second trimester. And so you were grieving the loss of your mom, pregnant with your second child. And once again, your life felt like it was out of control, but you had new awarenesses and new knowledge that you didn't have to prove anything to yourself or to Peter or to anyone in your circle anymore. You could just be your authentic self and receive the help that people are willing to step forward and give to you.
Yes.
So maybe the gratitude partially is grateful for your own new awarenesses.
Yes.
And for the growth that you got to experience and the blessings that you gave to those that stepped in and were willing to help you. Because when we say, no, we got it, Mary taught me this, is that we block the blessing that someone's offering to give to us. When we say, no, we got it, we block a gift that they want to give to us.
Yes.
And so I was very much like you. For 54 years of my life, it was all about the same behavior that you have, without getting too much deep into my own story. But what I understand today is that when people offer, it's very rare that I don't accept it today, because I don't want to block the blessing from them. I want them to get something out of it, that for the reason that they're offering to help. And so we both get something out of that exchange in a relationship. It really up-levels our ability to experience a form of healthy intimacy. It's a new type of intimacy that both you and I didn't experience prior.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. And you've put it so beautifully. And yes, that connection.
How do you feel right now in this moment, from when we started the show to now? What's going on? Are you aware of any physical experiences or any emotional in this moment that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I feel quite, you've just explained it. I actually, in the reflection process of sharing that experience, I have an immense amount of gratitude, as you said, for the growth that I've gone through to get to this point. And that I feel like now, I have this, I have had this experience, and now I can, now I'm ready to share it with others, like I've done today and like I've started doing on my own page. Because when I feel as though when you truly surrender, and when you are courageous enough to be vulnerable, healing takes place. And I feel like, I feel this sense of joy and love to be at this point. And I think about all the, everything that's got me to this place. And I'm really grateful.
So am I. We are at the hour, and to respect your time, I know it's 11:30 a.m. Saturday morning in Queensland, Australia. If you have a few minutes, if it's okay with you, I'm okay with going over just a bit, because there may be a few more things that you would like to share. If you do need to go, then we could wrap it up right now. I'm going to put that on you, let you make this decision.
Yeah, I'm good to, I've got more time.
Okay. So fast forward now, your second son is born. You've made it to this point, and now he is born, and what happens next for you?
So then, so then I go on this journey of, um, you know, getting through processing the grief. So processing the grief of the experience of losing my mum, and that, that's a whole that's a whole big thing in itself, um, because I hadn't experienced anything like that before. I think I was quite young when a couple of my grandparents died, but it's not, it just wasn't the same. I was quite close with my mum, so I then went on a journey of processing the grief and really learning about myself through that process, and I got to have a whole different experience of this early part of motherhood, um, the infant stage with a child, because it was really a blur with my first son, and I felt as though I didn't really enjoy that first year with him. So then with my second son, I had this awareness that I wanted it to be different. So I definitely had I was more present in those first few months with my son, with my second son, and I had, um, I had lots of support. I did lots of personal inner work, and I had lots of counseling, and I did um, lots of self-care and things that I didn't do the first time around. So I feel like I embodied all of the things that I had learned from my first experience, and then just worked on reconnecting with my first son, because I really felt the disconnection because of what I'd experienced. So I just, in the next, my youngest son is now 4.5. So in those next couple of years, I just worked on really reconnecting our family, learning new parenting tools, and Peter, my husband, talks about the way he was parented and how he wants to do everything differently. So we just really came together to um, reconnect as a family.
Beautiful. And today, your sons are 6 and
4.
how are they doing today?
Yeah, they're great. So we recently, um, recently because I've got sons, and I'm really passionate about, sharing the message with other mums that we need to raise our sons differently to previous generations. So I've spent the last 4 years um, really empowering myself with enlightened and conscious ways of raising young men. And so I really put my focus into that. So, and I've learned so much about my husband in the process, and he's learned a lot about himself in this process. And, so we want to be conscious parents and really working through our own stuff so that we can, best guide our little boys into being conscious men.
Wow. Wow,
So
this is beautiful. This is amazing. A matter of fact, Skye, I'd like to make you an offer. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
I would love to invite you back on, and let's do a show together on my other platform, Real People No, actually, let's come in. Well, it doesn't matter which platform. We could come in on Real People, Real Stories, or we could have you as a special female guest. I've only had a few on Real Men, Real Talk, Raw, because what you're just talking about now is huge. And I'd love to have the conversation regarding raising conscious children. That's beautiful what you're doing because you're breaking a cycle, at least in your own family. And at the same time, by the work you're doing, and you'll share a little bit about that, uh, you're you're helping to expand other people's awareness on how we could create change in the society that we live in the next generation of children being born and being raised.
I would love to.
That's a job in itself right there.
It is.
So we're going to have to set another date for you to come in, and because this is another topic that's just so close to my heart, and that's part of why I do the work that I do today, to hopefully impact change in society for the better, so people cannot be suffering and just surviving, but learning how to not survive but thrive by making different choices and in our life.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna set another date, but in the meantime, thank you so much for sharing that. I can't wait to hear more about that work. Would you mind taking a little bit of time now to share? Is that primarily the work that you do? I know that you actually have stepped forward and you do your own lives. I think they're spontaneous.
Yes.
You don't have set days and times, but you come in live when you appear to be inspired to have a conversation with the people in your community, to talk about whatever is on your mind in that moment, which of course I absolutely respect and honor. And I love when I see you coming on live, because I know the work you're doing is making a difference. It's impacting people's lives. Well, tell me a little bit more about what that is like for you, and the work that you are doing, so people can know where they can find you on Facebook as well.
So in this process of my own awakening, I've learned that, and I think everybody has a message to share. Personally, from the experiences that I've had in my life, and that I've done it in a conscious way, that I've looked at my experiences as an opportunity to learn and grow, that now I'm in a place where I want to share that message and share those insights and that wisdom in order to help other people and to connect with others, so that they know that they're not alone in that experience. And that process, the process of identifying that that's what I wanted to do, and that these experiences that I've had are my gift to share with others, that then I hit a block, and that was this experience of self-expression. And so in the process of breaking through those limiting beliefs and those blocks, and then there's been a whole lot of insight and wisdom in that experience. And so now my message encompasses finding your voice, because I think that, I grew up feeling very stifled, and my mum, from her own depression, wasn't really emotionally available for me growing up. And my dad was not emotionally available either. And then my sister's issue with mental illness I was just felt like I was in a box, and I was a very good listener and a very good support of others, but really didn't honor myself in any way, shape or form. And so now I feel as though I've got this opportunity to share these experiences and this wisdom that I had, but I needed to get through the block of being able to express myself. And so I've gone through that. And so now my lives, just 5 or 6 months ago, I was paralyzed by fear of getting on and doing it. I couldn't do it. I would do pre-recorded things. So I've broken through that fear, and now I'm, feel safe enough to express myself, and that took growth and personal insight and all of those things. And so part of my message is helping others do the same.
What do you think was the shift for you to be able to push that button that says live? How did you push through the fear and the anxiety of that?
I think the thing is that my desire to help others and my desire to have an impact is greater than my fear.
Beautiful.
And that when that first experience of having somebody come back to me and said, "You've just changed my life and you've just changed my perspective by sharing what I shared," I just, the way my heart swelled and the feeling that I had from that experience is what it's all about. And that it's wasted if we play small. It's wasted if we stay stuck. And we have this opportunity to really change the world and help people awaken if we can get over ourselves.
I love that answer. I actually heard one of my coaches and mentors recently talk about that. I don't recall who it was. It doesn't really matter. But what matters is it was exactly what you just said. And as a host of shows and also doing my own spontaneous lives, I too had to really navigate through the fear of going live. And I loved when I heard him share just that, because he acknowledged that he had the same experience initially, but he realized, I think it was actually Tony Robbins that said that, when he realized that it was Tony that said, when he realized that it was more about the message that he needed to share than worrying about how he was looking or how his voice was sounding, but he knew that his message was important, even if it just touched one person. And if it impacted change, positive change in someone else's life, then that outweighed him being self-critical of his own performance. Because the reality is we're not performing. We're just showing up and doing the work and having our voice heard for someone else to hear what they need to hear. And so that was absolutely beautiful to hear you share that as well. I am so excited for you, Skye. And I'm excited to learn more and hear you speak more, because you have so much to say. And your sons and Peter, what are your sons' names, by the way?
Zoltan and Xander.
Beautiful names, very different. They are blessed to be able to call you their mom and Peter's wife and partner, because you have so much to share and to give, coming from a healthier space today than you probably were capable of giving before.
Yes.
And it's so beautiful to meet someone like yourself who has reached this stage in their life where you appear to have a little bit more inner peace and calm and stillness, and perhaps even some serenity than you ever experienced before in your life. And that's the greatest gift you could give to yourself.
Yes.
So we are at the point where I think we should call it a wrap. I would like to invite you to perhaps put a pretty bow on the show and share some parting words, and then I'll close this out.
So I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my message. And what I would love to the parting words for anyone out there listening is that, you know, there are other ways. There is a way out of these deep, dark days of postpartum or postnatal depression and anxiety. And that all you have to do is the beginning and the very first step is to know and believe in yourself that you're capable of getting through this and ask for help. And that's just the beginning. And once you do that, things can really start to change, and there absolutely is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you for sharing that, Skye. My closing comments are that what's important in that process, as you just shared, is to understand that there are choices. There's just not one that your traditional primary care physician may give to you or direct you to, or your therapist or psychiatrist, but there are choices, there are options to consider. Do your homework, get educated, do research online, seek out other professionals that are on a holistic side, and at least get enough information so that you could then listen for what the right answer is. And the right answer isn't what they say, it's what you feel inside, because you already have the answers. They just are there to help remind you of what they are. And what I mean by that is that your intuition, you know what's best for you. Once you've done your research and your homework and you've gotten a little more educated, and you don't put all your faith and trust in one person, but you expand your knowledge, your awareness, so that you could make the best decision in the moment that feels right for you. And sometimes you don't have to choose one or the other. We could choose a hybrid. We could choose a short-term hybrid. You know, if someone is in really bad shape and they choose that short-term, it makes sense for them to get on prescription drugs to be a bridge until they get stabilized. If that feels right, then by all means, honor that and do what you need to do. But my suggestion is that we don't just pigeonhole ourselves into a corner of one choice. We could do a hybrid of both, but get busy, because when we get busy, we get well. You, Skye, got busy. You changed your diet. You took things out that you knew were no longer serving you. They were actually causing you great harm. You changed your diet. You changed your nutrition. You said you physically started to move, as difficult as it was, because when you're in darkness, the only thing you want to do is put another room darkening shade over the second layer and a third layer. You just want it to get darker. I know all about that, believe me. But you got busy. You forced yourself to get out off the sofa or out of bed, and you started physically getting busy, and you started to see results. And then you started to do the meditation. You reached out to naturopathic. You took many action steps, and that gave you your life back in a way that you probably never even imagined was possible. Because as you said before we went live, I asked you if you had ever suffered with depression or anxiety prior to being pregnant. And your answer was, I didn't know that I had pretty much lived in a constant state of anxiety my whole life. That was just my norm. I didn't know that that's what I was living in. But I do know today that that is, in fact, what I was living in was more of anxiety than depression. And I was able to identify with that, because that was the state that I lived in for 54 years of my life. And today what I know is it's a choice. I do believe it's a choice to stay living in a constant chronic state of anxiety and or depression. I know that there's a way out because I broke through. And you have shared tonight that you broke through, but you continue to work at it. But it's not feeling like work because behind each action step that you take and I take every single day, that I'm given another day, I get the gifts of the experience of growth about myself and about my capabilities and abilities that I never knew I had. And with that, Skye, thank you for joining us. If you have a story, if you're listening to us live or on replay, and you have your own story of self-healing, whether it be from a medical diagnosis, physical or mental health, and you want to step forward and you're ready, excuse me, to share your story as part of your healing journey, please reach out to me through a private message or messenger, send me a note, and we'll get you in live. And with that, Skye, if you could stay in the studio just for a few moments after. Thank you for joining us on Real People, Real Health this Sunday. I am excited. I got a show coming in. Actually, Sunday's guest is Karen Andrews. She's actually coming in from, I believe she lives in Australia. She's going to come in and share her backstory on Real People. I think she's going to come in on Real People, Real Health as well. But she's going to come in and share a story, an amazing story of how she has reinvented herself today. And so I will post over the weekend what time the show will be live. But thanks to you for joining us on Real People, Real Health. We'll catch you on Sunday. Thanks for joining us if you caught us live or replay. Thank you.